that so Honourable Dr Duncan Webb.
Tēnā koe te mana whakawā. Madam Speaker, the Privileges Committee is one of the most senior committees of this House, and it's usually bipartisan, and it almost always presents a unanimous report. And it's actually really unfortunate that that's not the case today. The Labor Party doesn't support the recommendations of the committee as to sanction. The proposed sanctions of 7 days and 21 days are disproportionate, unprecedented and vindictive. I think it's really important to put on the record why we concluded that whilst there was a contempt of the House, we can't agree with the sanctions proposed by the majority. The facts are well known. Many were present in the House for the incident where the members concerned performed a haka while the vote was being tallied on the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill. We're all familiar with the haka. It's a well understood ritual, and in this case it was energetic and it was theatrical. It's intended to express things like anger, challenge or endurance over adversity. But at its heart it was a performance. There was never any suggestion of physical violence. It was never remotely likely. And it's well known that those three members chose not to attend the Privileges Committee or provide any explanation. They weren't required to attend the committee. They were not called to attend and therefore did not have to. Whilst they can't claim credit for cooperation, nor can they say they were denied an opportunity to explain, neither can they be punished. It appears that some members of the committee may feel affronted that members didn't come to the committee when they were invited. They may even consider that the members were defiant in not attending. However, they were not required to attend. This is no justification for the imposition of a punishment which is disproportionate and arbitrary. Look, this place is noisy and sometimes chaotic. It is the preeminent lawmaking body. And when we make a decision, we do it by vote. And that is what was disrupted. And it's clear that Standing Order 417 says that obstructing the House in a performance of its duties will amount to a contempt. So the finding of contempt was inevitable. But as a matter of first principle, we consider that a suspension of 3 weeks for Mr Waititi and Ms Nario Haka and 7 days for Ms Rawiti Maipi-Clark to be inconsistent with the fundamental nature of this democracy. These people have been elected to speak in this House for their constituency. It's their right to speak, and it is the right of their constituency to be spoken for. It is such an important step to suspend a member.
We're not going to be able to have a debate if we're going to shout over one another.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secondly, it's really important we take consistent approaches across different Privilege Committee decisions. This decision is wildly out of step with any other decision of the Privileges Committee. Robert Muldoon was suspended for 3 days for issuing a press statement which criticised the Speaker. Jonathan Hunt was suspended for 1 day for criticising the Speaker in a radio interview. That demonstrates how truly extraordinary this 7 and 21 day suspensions are. There have been examples in this House of people, of current members. In 2023, Tim van der Molen was found to have committed a contempt when he actually threatened a member. In that case, Mr van der Molen stood next to the chair of a select committee at the conclusion of a committee and told him to stand up. The committee found there was an objectively threatening element to Mr van der Molen's behaviour, and that impeded the member in the conduct of his duty. That was a contempt, and Mr van der Molen was told to apologise. Now, finding a contempt is a serious matter, and it's appropriate that he apologise to the House, but there was no suspension there. In this case, even if it wasn't intimidation, and it's not accepted there was, that is how it should be treated with, not by a very large suspension. And of course, there's Ms Genta's case where she moved across this House and spoke in a loud fashion to Mr Ducey and waved the document in front of him. Again, a contempt, but only asked to apologise. That shows that the decision of this committee, of the Privileges Committee, its recommendation is absolutely out of order. And in the case of Ms Maipi Clark, only a modest allowance has been made for the fact she has already been suspended for a day. She's a relatively junior MP and she has already spoken to the Speaker and expressed contrition. Now, there's no rule against double jeopardy, but it is wildly disproportionate to impose another 7 days. We cannot see any defensible justification for the conclusion of the majority of the committee. And finally, the clerk provided some very important advice and observations to the committee. Firstly, the clerk said in his advice, this would be a very substantial change to the House's practice, recognising it would be a radical departure from what had gone before. That advice recommended that any departure be done only with broad support amongst the members of the committee. That is to say, near consensus or near unanimity. And that any massive shift would appear arbitrary. It also suggested that a very clear rationale should be provided if that decision was to be taken. None of that advice was taken. Not one piece of that advice was taken by the majority of the committee. The majority view is partisan, arbitrary, vindictive and wildly out of step with previous decisions of the committee. And that was done with a bare majority. Given the status of the Privileges Committee and the importance of its decisions in keeping order in this House, it is deeply regrettable. That decision should be disregarded by this House and by future Privileges Committee. There is an amendment on the table and I urge members around the chamber to adopt that amendment, impose a sanction which is reasonable and proportionate and put aside personal prejudice.